Hello and welcome. My name is Guru Pathik, and this is another replay review. Today we're going to be checking out a 1.5k Ember who said, I was top with a pre-made friend of mine, Marana, and a random Coddle. We wanted to push the tower fast versus the opponent's Invoker. I think the laning went okay, but in this game I got destroyed by a Lifestealer in the late game. I feel like we could have won, so I'm wondering what I could have done. That's pretty much it. I'll leave a post of the Dota buff as well as the match ID below, so if you want to check it out, you're welcome to as well. Let's see. First things first, you're playing Ember. Ember's gotten really popular recently, and with good reason. He's got a pretty good skill set for fighting in the mid game. And we'll take a look at your lineup. Looks like your lineup you've got. I know you're going safe. I know Ember could go mid, but I kind of checked to see which lane you were going to go before, and you also said that you were going safe. So it looks like you're going to have either a mid Pudge or a mid Viper, and you said that the Potom is one of your buds, and he's probably going to be supporting you. He might be roaming or doing other things as well, and it looks like Coddle might support you too. A little bit unsure of your lanes, but my guess would be off lane Pudge, mid Viper, safe lane Ember. And then if we look at their lineup, they got a pretty aggressive lineup in the Tusk and Spiritbreaker. We're probably going to be looking for a lot of kills early. Something to keep in mind, like these are the heroes you kind of want to track in the early game because they're heroes who can kill you. Let's see, Ogre's probably going to be supporting safe, and Lifestealer will probably be in the safe lane. He may jungle too, honestly. And you said you were going up against an Invoker, so my guess would be that Invoker goes mid, but I guess not. So maybe it's mid Tuskar, off lane Invoker. Really tough to say, honestly. But in terms of your team strategy, like they have pretty good late game, but they're most scary in the ganking sense, like the diving and ganking sense. And you have okay late game as well. But I'd say your late game's probably a little bit better. It's kind of debatable. So I guess in this game, like lineups are fairly evenly matched. There's nothing too strong about either lineup, and so they're mostly both kind of in that same ballpark. And so it'll come down to sort of who snowballs better. And we'll see how that happens in the mid game. But most Ember games, you know, a lot of heroes have like a certain strategy that's the strongest for winning the game with them. And Ember's strategy most of the time is to just get as big as humanly possible because he doesn't have a window where he necessarily wins the game on his own. He just kind of keeps farming and farming and farming and farming, and then eventually he's so far ahead of the other team that they just can't handle him. And you just get a bunch of kills and then you end the game at that point. But he's a little different from, say, like a Viper who's like aiming to build a mech and then end the game when he finishes his Ags, like 23 minutes. Like Ember doesn't necessarily have that window because he's pretty good in all stages of the game, honestly, except the laning phase where he's a little bit weaker. So we'll check this out. Opening item build, you win a Quelling Blade as well as a Stout Shield and some Tangos. I think you need more regen than this, honestly. I'd bypass the Quelling Blade just because it might be useful and it might help you last hit. But I think when you like what you want to do with your item build is to create a situation where you have flexibility, and this is something you can purchase at the side shop, whereas regen is something you have to purchase at the base. And as a safe laner, you really don't want to be taking the courier from your mid unless you have to, kind of thing, in the first 2 to 3 minutes because they really need their bottle. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that taking the bottle from a mid or taking the courier from the mid can often lead to you losing the mid lane. And it's, you know, you weren't there, you weren't clicking into the heroes, but sometimes delaying items to the mid lane can have a major impact on your game. And so just something to think about. Most of the time when I go safe lane, I like Tango and a Salve, and the Mangoes become quite popular now to have one mango because the cost got reduced, and so it's actually pretty cheap to have one. And then if you need a Quelling Blade, you can pick it up at the side shop after 1 or 2 last hits. So there's flexibility in that build because the items that you can get are still from the side shop. There are some people who even skip the Stout Shield as a safe lane Ember and go a Ring of Protection instead, because a really common item build for Ember is to go Ring of Aquila or just Ring of Bassi in general. So what they'll do is they'll buy the Ring of Protection because you can't buy that at the secret shop, and then pick up the Stout Shield, pick up the Quelling Blade, pick up a Poor Man's Shield, whatever, at the side shop as things start to unravel. Just something to think about. It's a little bit more aggressive, I think, to go with the Ring of Protection build, as they're probably going to have like a Spirit Breaker Tusk in your lane, and so maybe having the Stout Shield earlier is way more beneficial. So Invoker shows up. You guys are looking to contest the top rune. You've got a Pudge, and Pudge hooks you. This is okay. I think your team probably could have contested that rune a little bit better. Like if you all just run out there and then Potom tries to arrow. But not a big deal. So you don't get the rune. This is also part of the reason, like, you don't want to be the frontliner contesting the rune if you don't have much regen. Because now you only have 3 tangos for your entire laning phase. Unless you're willing to send out more regen, which can be okay. I mean, I send out regen in the safe lane sometimes. So you don't block the creep wave, which isn't a big deal. And you've got an Invoker. So yeah, Pudge off lane, and they sent Tusk mid. It's really important to familiarize yourself with who's in what lane at the start of the game, as it really gives you an impression of like how the game's gonna go. And so in this first minute, you know, like I was really confused as to what their lineup was gonna do, but take a look, right? Because it really shapes how the game is going to go, kind of thing, and what things you should look to expect. So Tusk is mid, Lifestealer is safe lane, and you've got Ogre supporting him in the safe lane. So the question is, like, Invoker is top, but then one of their heroes is missing, and so it's Spirit Breaker. So what is Spirit Breaker doing? And at this point I would be playing around that. Like a level 1 Spirit Breaker is not very scary, but he's either pulling or he's like roaming around top or roaming around mid. Like there's some reason that he's just not in lane, and my guess is that he's pulling. But keep this in mind, because when Tusk is mid, you're going to look to expect a gank from Tusk, because Tusk is a mid that likes to gank when he hits level 7, and so that'll be around minute 5. So you'll be expecting aggression at that point, and maybe a little earlier because of Spirit Breaker. Yeah, Spirit Breaker's bottom, so. Here, Mirana is kind of killing your range creeps, which is fine. Like, generally you want that support, and it looks like you guys are just signaling to push. It's kind of what's happening. Mirana's taking some of your last hits. Okay, I'm fine with you wanting to push, but when you want to push the lane, what you want to do most of the time, like, I think in this situation you guys don't necessarily have the best pushing heroes. Like, Coddle's okay for pushing waves, but he's not actually that good for pushing towers. Nukes are good for pushing waves and are actually better for defending towers more so than pushing towers. Whereas heroes with creeps, for example, Furion, Chen, and Enchantress, are usually better at pushing towers because they have things that can soak tower shots. But when you're looking to push, like, what Potom did is right, in the sense that she's pushing the range creep first, because the range creep does the most damage, so it causes your wave to push the fastest. But what you want to do is you want to wait until you have a siege creep, because all of these different creeps do different damage types. And this is something that you can read about on the WoW Wiki, or not WoW Wiki, the Dota 2 Wiki at some point. But like, these guys do piercing damage, these guys do normal damage, and then there's a siege damage type which does more to towers. So you want to time your push with when the siege creep spawns, which the siege creep spawns once every 4 minutes, I think it is. I have to look this up. How often does the siege creep spawn? I'll put it on the screen afterward. But like timing your pushes to go with that siege creep will increase the amount of damage you deal to this tower by about 300 or 400. Whereas at this point, you're just going to push this wave in and do, I don't know, 200, 300, 400, maybe a lot of damage. But you're going to miss out on quite a bit. Because most tower pushes in the top lane take more than a couple of pushes. Take more than one push is what I'm trying to say, especially in the early game. So you guys are pushing the tower. I mean, all of these decisions strategically come at a cost, which is you're going to give free experience to the invoker. Right? And like that push, for example, like we'll take a look at how much damage you did. But none. So like you basically paid, you know, a level and a half worth of experience for no tower damage. The other way you generally want to push too is like not only waiting for that siege creep, but you want to double wave your wave first, and the way you do that is by pulling, which is kind of what Coddle did, and not allowing your wave to die, because now you have 2 waves of creeps. But again, if you have a siege creep, it's another 200 or 300 extra points of damage. I'm talking about this a lot just because like your last hitting is fine. You're in a free lane, which means that all of your last hits should, like, you should get every last hit. Like, it's pretty, I think it's unacceptable to miss last hits like that, but that's because I'm so used to getting contested that when I do get free farm, I'm like, yes, free farm, finally. But see, again, like, you double wave the wave to try and push the tower, and again, like, no damage. Whereas this guy, he's now 3.5. So like you're feeding away all this experience, but you're not accomplishing any objectives. And I think the goal of a safe lane tri lane most of the time should be to keep the offlaner at level 1 while securing free farm on your safe laner. And you're getting safe lane on your free farm on your safe laner, which is really good. But like, I think the goal should be to strive for more. Potom throws an arrow, misses. And I don't know if this is like fairly common in 1.5k, but competing over farm in the safe lane is just something that happens in general. And like, it looks like your Quelling Blade build ended up being fine, because they really didn't contest you, so like going more farming items is definitely awesome. But I still would have liked the flexibility to have more regen. Another missed last hit. Another missed last hit. You seem to have pretty good understanding though. Like, you walk up. So like here, this is a situation where, you know, you can sit back if you want to and play defensive, or you can get like pretty aggro on this invoker with the intent of zoning him out of experience range. I'm not necessarily saying this is the right time to do it, but if we go back, and we'll kind of watch this. So what's going to happen is you're going to have 3 sort of melee creeps, which is like, these are the creeps that are going to take tower shots for you. And so one of your options right now, especially as an Ember, is you can just turn on your fire shield and run past the wave and just run at the invoker. And a good invoker will probably just sit there and right click you. But sometimes invoker will get spooked and he'll just run away. And if you can get him to run down here and these creeps die, he misses out on all the experience from that wave. And it may not sound important. Invoker's not like a super scary offlaner because there's no level at which he starts to kill you. But you definitely don't want to give him levels, kind of thing. Whereas you're just sitting back here kind of watching the wave. Like, another thing you could be doing is you could be trying to pull this, although Coddle is pulling this wave, so maybe not. But, like, you're not achieving anything right now in the, 10 seconds you're standing under tower. You're not using any of your mana, you're not last hitting at all, you're just kind of watching the offlane invoker farm as a tri-lane, which is pretty bad. One other thing you could be doing is that you end up missing a last hit here under tower. you end up missing this guy because you're too scared to come up to the tower and get the last hit, or come up to the invoker and get the last hit. There are a couple of reasons. So one thing you could do is you could walk around to the left here. The tower will never focus you because the way tower aggro works is it attacks the nearest unit. So it attacks, if any unit is attacking it, it takes priority. So it will attack units that are attacking the tower first. If you're attacking an enemy hero, you're the highest priority. So if you're attacking an enemy hero, the tower attacks you. If you're attacking the tower attacks you. But if there's multiples in those categories, so let's say there's like 5 heroes attacking another hero, for example, it'll attack the closest hero to the tower that is attacking the hero. So one way you can avoid getting attacked is you can just stand further away than other creeps, and the tower will always focus those first. Whereas if you right-click a hero, it'll start focusing you, kind of thing. But here, another thing that you could do is you could do like an aggro mechanic. And if you watch, upper level games, you'll see these all the time. But like right here, what you can do is you can click this invoker, like right click him like you're gonna attack him. Obviously you're out of range, but what it'll do is these creeps will get pissed off at you, because anything within a 500 aggro radius, which is about this wide, if I had to draw the circle, it's like this, somewhat like that. It's a range you kind of get familiar with over time. I don't have a good example of a 500 aggro radius. You kind of just have to get used to it. Like the radius on rank 4 Sleight of Fist is 550. So when you hit rank 4 Sleight of Fist, I'll kind of show you that range. But right here, if you right click him, these creeps will aggro you, and you right click him and immediately retreat. And what'll happen is these creeps will run at you, which means that these creeps will be here to farm rather than here. It's just a little bit safer. And you can be doing that at any point. Like if you watch a lot of offlaners, or a lot of higher level offlaners, they'll be creep pulling like that pretty much the entire wave, because it reduces the damage you intake to farm. Like, I can definitely see the concerted effort there to push, or a concerted effort by your team to push, but you still haven't done any damage to the tower in 5 minutes, which is really bad. So like, you have to be, like, I agree, like Invoker can't stop a push if you decide to push and you do it the right way, but right now you're just kind of not going about it the right way. And again here, like to see you playing more aggressive under the tower. You come up and hit the tower here, but you end up taking a tower shot. This is actually a pretty good little thing for understanding tower aggro. So right here, you kind of have a window in which you can hit the tower, because the tower will always finish off whatever target it's attacking before it switches to a new target. So this attack is fine. The tower is not going to hit you because it still hasn't finished off the creep. This attack, on the other hand, is not fine because it's just finished killing this creep. Therefore, it's picking a new target. And if you look at all the rules of tower aggro, right? You're attacking the tower, so it's going to attack you first, right? But if you're just standing here, not attacking the tower, or if you move away and not attack the tower, it'll pick one of these creeps. So if you'd waited on this attack, and you'll see this every once in a while, but like here, this attack is fine. Stop attacking and just wait. And then once the tower switches to here, you can attack it twice more. And then wait. And then when it switches to this guy, you can attack it twice more. Like you could get 4 or 5 extra last hits off on that tower. And that damage may become relevant later. So Coddle's here, more pushing. And like this is just a tough situation. Here comes that Tusk. Right around minute 5. So you end up getting away, kind of because Tusk screws up. But do you see what I mean when I evaluated the lanes like 4 or 5 minutes ago? I haven't been paying very good attention to the minimap. But what you want to be doing with that is you're prepping your mind to think like, where is Tusk? I need to be asking where Tusk is. Because when he does come to gank, then you're ready for it in the sense that, oh, I thought about this, so I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. Or in, you know, the 4 to 6 minute range, you're actually watching the map actively, which is probably the best for those movements to your lane, rather than like, oh my god, Tusk is here, what the frick happened. You're actually ahead of the game, right? If you can anticipate your opponent, you'll do way better than if you're just reacting to your opponent. And Dota's a game that, like, I call this scripting, where you kind of like script how you expect the game to go.
Radiant's middle tower is under attack.
But most heroes follow a pretty specific script, right? Like as a safe lane Ember, you're looking to farm until you hit like level 7. And then once you hit level 7, you might roam around the map, maybe look for a couple of kills, or you could just keep farming the safe lane. Like your first 10 minutes are pretty stagnant, just like Lifestealer. Right? Lifestealer's probably going to farm down here until he farms up a pretty good amount of items, and then he'll go jungle. You know, and then he'll just keep farming, kind of thing. Whereas Tusk's script, so to speak, is to hit level 7, push out his wave, and then go gank. And most of the time it's going to be the safe lane. And if you can anticipate those things, then you're not going to be dying to them. Here, Tusk shows up again, kills you. This is just a consequence of not having enough regen. Like if you'd had a salve there, you could have salved up to full. Or if you'd even spent your gold, like you might be rushing Boots of Travel. Most pros, like this is the build, the standard build on Ember nowadays, or the most common build that pros go, is this Boots of Travel rush, but you'll almost never see them rush it. They'll almost always go for little stat items first, as well as maybe a bottle. Okay, so at this point in the game, right, you want to be thinking about what's happening. What's happening is Tusk has now ganked your lane 3 times in a minute and a half. And if I were Tusk, or if I were the safe laner, I would be thinking, this Tusk isn't going to leave. He's just going to continue ganking this lane. Right? Like, there's no reason to think that he'll leave if he's converting on these ganks. 2 out of the 3 ganks have been successful. He's killed you once, he's killed bottom once. And so at this point, what you can do, as opposed to like just going back into lane to this Tuskar is just going to continue ganking you, is you can go elsewhere on the map and you can do other things. Now you're level 4, which is a consequence of your mistakes during the laning phase, which was you pushed the wave, you didn't maximize your experience, and you didn't keep the Invoker down, so now the Invoker is level 5 and doing really well in the offlane. Like he's a higher level than your entire wave, except maybe Mirana. It's funny that Mirana's a higher level than you, but I guess you died under tower and missed experience. But you're pretty gimped at this point. And so one thing you can do, as opposed to TPing into the lane that they're ganking, is you could just TP mid and farm there. Viper's there, so it's a little inefficient for your team. But sometimes maybe you want Viper to mirror his movements. Like most of the time, if a mid ganks top, the other mid TPs to protect it. But you can't expect that kind of play in 1.5k. But like your item build, as of right now, just like big issues with the sense that you don't have any regen at all. And if I were Invoker, I would make a point to just come up and whack you. Because you're level 4. I mean, you're now level 5, so there's that. But you don't have any way of sustaining yourself in lane. And if you had gone like a bottle build and been more actively pursuing runes, then that's a way of deterring Tusk from ganking you. Here, like, I want to see you looking at this rune and seeing what rune he picks up. Right? Like, that's the point of wards. Take advantage of them. And here he comes back, right? Like, now you should be backing. Good. So you saw him coming, or someone notified you. So that's good. Tusk is now ganking. I think you took the wrong path here. Then again, he's got a haste, so there's not much you could do there. Maybe you could try to kill the Invoker by like kind of swooping down behind him, but it's definitely safer to go up. There's no reason for Coddle to die there. Like, there's no reason for any of you to die there. You have full vision of Tuskar. Your last hits are okay, honestly. Like, not the best. 35 last hits isn't the best. I think at 10 minutes, like what you're looking for if you're free farming perfectly is like somewhere in the neighborhood of 70. You can get more than that if you're farming the lane in addition to farming creep stacks. But as an Ember Spirit, that's a little bit more difficult. If you're a Shadow Fiend, then definitely. But I think if you go back and watch this replay, I haven't been paying too close attention to it, you've probably missed somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 last hits just from not getting farm. Like, you missed that range creep there. And it adds up, kind of thing. Like, you've missed one a wave, then, you know, you're going to end up missing 2 times 10, that's 20 creeps. And so I'm saying you're missing about 0.75 or 0.5 a wave, and that ends up being around 15. And 15 creeps is, you know, times 40 gold. That's 600 gold. You'd have your boots of travel and half of your next item. So, like, those free last hits are definitely something you want to be working on and make sure you're taking advantage of them. But now what you've done in this laning phase is, because you've kind of given away all this free experience to Invoker, is now Invoker's kind of an issue because he's level 7. If this guy had been an offlane Tusk, for example, or a hero that once they hit level 6 they're super scary kind of hero, or a hero with a kind of ganking ultimate, you'd probably be dying right now. But because Invoker is Invoker and pretty weak for a long time. But because Invoker is a weaker hero earlier on, you're not going to get punished for it immediately, but you will get punished for it later, kind of thing, in that they'll have one more core that's strong in the late game. Like, this is worst case scenario right now. This is exactly where you don't want the creep wave. Because you can't pressure the Invoker. Pudge is in full vision there. You can't pressure the Invoker. You can't push the tower. The tower is like hitting your creeps. Good arrow. Okay. So something to think about here is that this is a really nice play by Mirana, throwing her arrow, and it's a pretty good reaction by her because the cast time on arrow is pretty long. But what happens here is you see Tusk over here, and you see the Spirit Breaker, and you're worried about the Spirit Breaker, obviously. But you waste your chains here when you could have used it on 2 heroes. You can also, like, because you would expect Spirit Breaker to be ganking, it's level 10, so it's not unreasonable for him to be level 6 at this point. He's level 6. He's gotten a couple of kills off in the other lanes. But you can actually interrupt his ultimate. Because, like, most Spirit Breakers, what they do is they charge in, and then they use their ultimate. And so you can get him to waste a second in his cast time, rather than instantly chainsing. Whereas if you had saved it to right here and changed at this point, maybe you don't get the Tuskar. But what you do is you delay his ultimate from hitting for 0.5 seconds, maybe a second, because he's got to recast it. And if he doesn't recast it immediately, and maybe your Potom gets off a leap instead of instantly dying. Which means maybe Potom gets off some right clips, maybe Potom gets off her Starstorm, maybe Potom gets off more spells, gets away, whatever. It allows your team to fight more. So you kind of wasted your Searing Chains there. And then here, it's kind of a losing fight at this point, in that it's 3v2. Potom got no spells off. Spirit Breaker's at half HP. Maybe you'll get a kill on him if you continue fighting at this point, but I'd be more inclined to just retreat and kind of use the time that they're killing Pudge to make sure that you get away. You're probably going to get away anyway because all their spells are on cooldown, but you may not. It just depends on how much mana this Tusk had. Because sticking around, now he's got a nice shards, which means you might get shardsed in, you might get snowballed, but you end up getting away. This is a really over-aggressive dive. But you use your remnants nicely to get away. You probably didn't have to retreat there, honestly. Like, I think at this point, you're kind of scared, because if they catch you here, you're probably dead. But at this point, you're probably looking to turn. And the reason is that it's too far for Invoker to chase without creeps. So it's literally Tusk by himself. And so at this point, instead of running, right, because you just had a TP in from your Coddle, you just chains him here. Granted, it's very much safer to run. But I think it was an opportunity to maybe get a kill with pink and green pincering him. If you could just outplay him a little bit with your searing chains and just use that ability to kite him. Granted, he had Walrus punch up, so if he got in range of you, you probably would have punched you and killed you. But as an Ember, like, you gotta look for those kinds of high skill plays. He would like to finish the poor man's shield here, which is okay. It's kind of in the wrong order. These are good kills. It's kind of in the wrong order. Like, Poor Man's Shield is most effective in the first 10 minutes. And after about 10 minutes, it starts to fall off, and it falls off really hard. Because if you look at the way, like, damage scales... I'll talk about this gank in a second. But if you look at the way damage works, like, Ogre obviously hits for, like, no damage, because he's not farming. But once this Lifestealer finishes this armlet, he's going to hit for, like, 150 damage. Which means you're only negating 20 of it with your Poor Man's Shield. Whereas early on, if he's hitting for 80 damage, then you're negating 20 damage out of 80, let's say. And that's a 25% reduction. But by the time he finishes his armlet, it's down to a 10% reduction. And the next item, it's a 5% reduction. Like, it really falls off hard. Like, this Invoker, he doesn't have his Exort Orbs up now, but he probably hits for like 140. So 20 damage off of 140 isn't as big a deal, whereas early on it may have been. Like, don't look to buy this as a 10-minute item. It's an early laning phase, help you in the laning phase item, not a 10-minute mid-game item. Like, this could have been 300 gold towards your bottle, or a magic stick even, and those would have been much better at this point in the game. In terms of this gank, I don't know how well coordinated it was, in the sense that, like, you're looking to TP in here, and maybe you're communicating with your team that, hey, let's gank these guys, and that's really good by you. One thing you could have done is you could have turned your fire shield on right here and abused the regen from the fountain. That's like one of the biggest reasons to buy Boots of Travel, as well as Bottle on a lot of heroes, not just Ember, but Ember, it works for Ember. You TP in and you turn your fire shield on, and you still have regen from the fountain for about a second. And so you can use your fire shield at this point to gain quite a bit of mana. And then here, what you end up doing is, let's see if you end up doing this. But like, you have this whole creep wave here, but because you're right-clicking him from so far away, what ends up happening is that these creeps end up chasing you because of aggro mechanics. Whereas if you're just clicking, and then once you're in range you right-click, these creeps would be hitting this tower right now instead of beating on you. Which is it doesn't end up mattering here, but it's an 150 extra damage that you're going to take to your hero when you probably didn't need to. It also makes it so that when you use your searing chains, you're, instead of hitting 2 out of 2 targets, you're now choosing between a range creep. Granted, he's invulnerable, so you wouldn't hit him anyway, but still, this is like a minor mistake, and it comes to aggro mechanics, and it doesn't end up mattering because these creeps kind of retreat back. But this guy is still beating on you. And you end up taking an extra, like, 20 points of damage. It's not that much. But it definitely, like, decreasing the amount of times that you can hit Searing Chains on is a bad thing. this is a nice Searing Chains. But here, like, you have no regen. This poor man's shield's not doing much for you. Whereas if you'd had a magic stick there, you probably would have gotten 5 or 6 magic stick charges, which is an extra 100 mana. Maybe it's 1 extra spell. Here you decide to TP back home. Fine with this. Overall, we'll take a look at the state of the game. Like, state of the game, it's a pretty even game in the sense that it's 9-8. But if you're looking around the map, like, Tuskar has been really involved. He's 5-0. So he's pretty scary right now and probably has a lot of farm. And I would be scared of his item progression, so I would make a point to look and see what items he's going. Like if he's going a Shadow Blade build, then you would have to play a lot different than if you were playing against a Tuskar with like a Drums build or a Sanjanyasha build or a Radiance build. Like they all have different play styles and they all have different things for you to pay attention to, as well as different parts of the map are safer than others. When he has a Shadow Blade versus when he has a Drums, for example. But they're really turning the heat on you guys. They're ganking pretty aggressively. And that's to be expected from their lineup, especially with Spearbreaker Tusk. Those heroes get active early and often. In terms of your farm is not very good. You're under-leveled, I would say, for a safe laner. I mean, they have 3 cores that are all higher level than you, and that's mostly because of mistakes in the laning phase. You weren't contested very much in the laning phase, but you gave away free experience. Like, look at this Invoker. He's level 8. Like, he's going to be a huge issue. Your last hits are pretty good, honestly. I mean, as you can see, compared to the other heroes in the game, only Lifestealer is kind of on par with you with last hits. Viper is sort of as well. So that's good, and it's probably a strength of your game. But strategically, we've made a lot of bad decisions. And you've died once, which really hurts your net worth. Haven't gotten any kills. You have been involved in 4 kills, which is pretty good. But overall, I would say like this game is tilting towards them. Definitely a game you can still make an impact in. Definitely a game you can still make a big comeback with. But it's going to be on the back of Viper sort of in this mid game, and I would be looking to support him sort of in the mid game. So like here, like click on him, see what his items are. You may be clicking on him. Something in replays is that they don't always show up. You probably could have killed that ogre. But like you're looking to get really active in the next 10 minutes or so, I would say, because that's really the strongest part of Ember. You can be farming in the safe lane though. That's the thing. Like part of the reason that pros go this build, this Boots of Travel build, is that they can always be at a team fight in an instant. So instead of farming with your team and basically wasting the mobility of Boots of Travel, you want to be farming off by yourself because you're impossible to gank with your remnants. But then you can instantly join fights, whether it be, you know, it's going to be 3 to 5 seconds late, 3 seconds at minimum, because you need to Boots of Travel TP away. That takes 3 seconds. And then the extra time is how long it takes you to react. But you can join instantly, so don't feel the need to be running around with your team. Like, this is all farm. You could have just TP'd top and taken this farm. Jungling is an okay option, but it's going to make you waste your mana, which you're not using the courier right now to send out your bottle. Which means like now you're not in a position to fight if they engage, kind of thing. Like if they engaged on mid right now with Tusk, what can you do? You have your spell on cooldown, you don't have much mana, there's not much for you to do, you're kind of just, your team's on their own. And that can be okay. But it's something to think about as an Ember Spirit, is you kind of always want to be ready to fight. Especially when you're expecting a lot of aggression from them. Like, you're going all the right items, I would say, but you're just not going them in the right order. Like here, they just engaged on mid. And if you had had mana, if you had not been jungling and instead farming the safe lane where you're not having to use resources to farm, you could have TP'd in and counter ganked and probably gotten a double kill there. And that's just anticipating the game. Again, like with your item progression, they're all the right items, they're just all in the wrong order. You know, like the point of getting the Wraith Band and the early Basilius is, one, it helps you push because you can turn the armor on, which means that towers take one extra hit to kill a creep, which is a big deal for pushing towers. But it also gives you a little bit of extra base damage, which makes it easier to last hit, which means you don't have to invest the gold in the Quelling Blade, which means you can get your boots of travel sooner. Like the Poor Man's Shield is so you're taking harass, but you really took no harass in lane, so now this item is kind of like a wasted amount of gold. The Stout Shield was fine, but the 300 gold was wasted, which means you could have half of your Wraith Band done now. Like the bottle, you could have controlled some of the top runes, gotten more regen, been afforded to play more aggressive. Like this would have been really good.
Radiant's top tower is under attack.
And they're fighting mid. And they kind of lost a fight because you weren't there. Granted, you don't have to always be there as a carry. Like, a lot of times as a carry, it's better to farm and kind of leave your team to their own devices, as kills in the early game don't matter as much as kills in the late game. But I think with Ember, you got to be looking to be more aggressive. Like, you never even turned your camera to that lane. Like, right now, you have Boots of Travel up, they're diving your tier 1. Like, look, see what's going on, right? I mean, I'm going to take a look. You're going to farm. But like all of these heroes right now, their spells are mostly on cooldown. Like this guy's out of mana, this guy's half HP out of mana, this guy's spells are all on cooldown. Like you could probably TP in right now and kill this Lifestealer, kill this Ogre, and get away scot-free. Like this is your time to shine. You are probably the strongest hero in the game right now, just based on your skill set, as well as your farm. Like, your net worth is pretty high up there. Like, Tusk is obviously higher. Maybe Tusk is the strongest hero on the map right now, but point is, you're the strongest hero on your team, especially with as a mid-game dominator like Ember Spirit, and you want to be using that to your advantage, rather than wasting your time to shine in the jungle, right? Lifestealer's time to shine is in the late game. He's pretty good in the early game, but in this game in particular, he's probably the hardest carry out there. Here you run into Invoker, and you die. So this death is paying attention to the map, because like Invoker is showing, so you obviously know he's there, but you can see Spirit Breaker twice with your wards. You can see him here, he walks into lane. Like you know Spirit Breaker's there. Tusk obviously isn't. He's showing mid. But Lifestealer's not showing, and then Ogre's not showing. So you got to think about where is Ogre, right? If Spirit Breaker's showing top, Ogre's probably up here too. He doesn't always have to be. Ogre could be in the safe lane, or pulling the safe lane. Sorry, there's like a fly in here, and he's just flying around. It's annoying the crap out of me. But like, for sure there are two heroes there. And I'm pretty sure Spirit Breaker and Invoker are scary enough to kill you, unless you like ramming it away pretty quickly. But this is just poor map awareness, right? What you're seeing is the creeps are pushing into the tower, which is right now after you finished your wave, rather than paying attention to the wave, right? You do not need to sit here and watch your hero auto attack this creep wave. There's like no reason to. Like, get your camera moving. It's in Dota, like, it's a game where you want to make a lot of good decisions, and it's very difficult to make good decisions if you're not giving yourself good information. And the best way to give yourself good information is to look around the map, look around the minimap, use your resources. Your minimap is like your best resource in Dota for knowing where heroes are. Just like your game knowledge, your game sense will give you knowledge as to what these movements of these heroes are likely to look like, right? Like I said at the beginning of the game, expect a gank around 6 minutes from Tusk. And at 6 minutes, almost on the dot, he shows up with a walrus punch to your face 3 times, kind of thing. Right? Like, you've got to be smart about the decisions you make. Whereas I think what happened here is you farmed this wave, you stared at your hero farming this, you didn't look at the minimap, and then what you did is you looked up and you say, where do I go next? Rather than anticipating where you could go next, or using the time that you had more efficiently. And what you do is you see these creeps up here and you're like, oh, I'm going to go farm those creeps under the tower. And you didn't realize that there were heroes here. So you run into Invoker, Spirit Breaker's right there, he shows up. Ogre also shows up, which isn't necessarily something you could have predicted. But you definitely could have predicted these two, and you probably would have just died to those two, honestly, without the Ogre being there. Ember is a hero that relies on outskilling his opponents. And the main reason he relies on that is he is boatloads of damage. Like, boatloads of damage. This is like a free radiance, essentially. This is, you know, a lockdown. It's basically a stun on 8-second cooldown for 3 seconds. So it's like almost 50% uptime. Like, that's ridiculous for a spell. It's like 25% actually. It's only 2 seconds. No, it's a 3-second duration, 8-second cooldown. But like his stats, he has 800 health and 3 armor. So he's one of those heroes who's really glass cannon-y. And glass cannon heroes rely on outplaying their other heroes, because if you get caught, you're pretty much dead. You can itemize so that you're not that squishy, like you can build a Scotty, but most Embers don't build that way. Most Embers build very glass cannon-y, like missed last hit. So here, like, you TP'd bottom, and they took a fight top. This isn't necessarily your fault, but most, like, when you play a game against good players, what they're going to do is they're going to understand that your spells have cooldowns, and when you TP bottom, right, you're essentially committed to that lane for the next minute. And that means that the other team's going to say, hey, Ember can't join this fight, we can take a numbers advantage fight top right now if we go. And your team should be thinking, Ember can't join. If they engage us right now, we're taking a fight that's at a numbers disadvantage. But what you're doing is fine. Like, your team engaged in a fight top, team ended up doing okay, traded 2 for 2, and you're pushing aggressively. Here, like, I'm okay with that Remnant out. I would have stayed and gotten that last hit before I went, but that's fine. There's nothing to fear about Lifestealer, and you know their whole team's top. So I think you could have afforded to play even more aggressive there, but what you did was okay. So Lifestealer has an armlet. So, like, this is just bad decision making in the sense that so Lifestealer is trying to bully you, which is what he should do, honestly. Like, he's stronger than you at this point because he's just finished his armlet and you just kind of went all mobility items. But, like, so he's trying to bully you out of the lane. But what you have to keep in mind as an Ember is how much mana you have. You use your Flame Guard, which is, like, okay if you're worried about somebody else coming, but no one else is coming. We know that. But we also kind of know that just based on the minimap, because they were all top and 2 of them are dead. Like, you can literally see all of their heroes on their team right now, in the sense that these 2 are dead. Yellow and purple are showing top. Lifesteal is here. So there's no reason to use your Flame Guard. Like, this is a waste of mana. And when you use your Searing Chains, like, he can just rage out of your Searing Chains. So most of the time you want to save this until post-rage against a Lifestealer, rather than using it and just letting him use 50 mana and basically negate your spell in addition to gaining a bonus on him. And then by using both of those spells, you have no mana to Remnant right now. Now, you're not going to die because he kind of wasted his open wounds too early. But you, like, if Spirit Breaker were to show up right now, you would be dead. Granted, he's not going to, based on what we know on the minimap. But, like, this is just a gross misuse of spells. Because, like, now you don't have the mana to use your Remnant. And that's just always something you gotta be thinking about as Ember. Is, like, how much mana do I have for my spells right now? And you only had 300, which isn't enough for all 3 of your spells. But he bullies you. You come back into lane. You're farming. Like, you're really committed to farming this lane. And Ember is like an okay late gamer. Like, he can go late game and do okay in the late game, but he's definitely not one of the strongest heroes in late game, in the sense that, like, he can kill everyone in like 2 or 3 sleight of fists, but he's got to be able to get 2 or 3 sleight of fists off, which is really difficult. Like, the strength of Ember is now, again, in that 10 to 20 minute mark when he is the strongest hero on the map just based on his skill set. And you're kind of using it to farm. Because if we look at the scoreboard, right, you're just going to be farming here. There's going to be more fighting top. Right, there's been 14 kills on your team, and you've been involved in 4 of them. So your participation's pretty down there. And as a safe laner, that's okay sometimes, but as an Ember Spirit, that's not okay. If you were a Medusa, I would say your involvement would be okay. Or if you were a Midas Wraith King, or a really, really hard late game hero, your involvement would be okay. Here you should be hitting the tower. Or looking top and looking to TP. Like, you can engage that. So, this is a situation where their whole team's top, they're all diving, and this tower is dead. Right, one, you could be killing the tower faster, because if they glyph this and instantly TP 3 heroes, like, you've got a back. And you're not going to get this tower, and it's going to get denied. And I'm almost 100% sure their glyph is up. No, it's not up. Never mind. Never mind. So they can't glyph and TP to this tower. But what you could do is you could just be saying this tower is dead, and you could be looking up at the top lane and saying, is this a situation where I can contribute? Right? Tusk is really low, but there's 4 heroes. Probably too late at this point. Maybe 10 seconds ago you might have been able to contribute. You know, like, maybe at this point you can contribute. It's tough to say. But what's happened in the first 10 minutes of the game is they've basically fought, your team has fought without you in that 10 to 20 minute window. When they devoted the safe lane to getting they devoted a lot of their time in the safe lane to getting farm on you. So you're the strongest hero on their team, and on your team, and your team is fighting without you, which is losing you a lot of these fights. Like, your boots of travel are up, they're diving even more. You gotta look, dude. You gotta look. Like, all you're seeing right now is creeps. Rather than all of this. Like, these heroes are dead if you TP in. So now you finally show up, and you get a kill. You've got a bottle, you don't see Pudge, Pudge gets a kill. Like, this reaction is just a minute and a half too late. Granted, it's really good for your team. You get a lot of kills. But it's just too late. Take a look at that tower. Battle Fury. At this point, your build's fine, in the sense that you're progressing items in a way that makes sense. Because Battle Fury makes sense in progression. But again, I would have liked to see these built in a different order. And again, like, jungling here is fine, especially with the way the state of the map looks. So I'm actually okay with it here. But most of the time at Ember, you're looking to push lanes. More fighting lanes. More fighting top lane, more fighting at the Ancients. Missed the Sleight of Fist Chains combo. Gets stunned. You have a Remnant. Not using it. Throw another Remnant. You probably could have gone in there, honestly, under the cover of silence. So something to think about with spells is what spells are on cooldown. Like, Tusk has used his Snowball. He hasn't used his Punch at this point. And Ogre has used his Stun, although his Stun has a low cooldown, so it's probably up again. Tusk's always also used his punch, so there's actually nothing they can do to you right now, and you can probably afford to play aggressively on them, as you have Viper hitting them from the low ground. Like, here I would have chained them, and maybe, like, kited them a little bit, rather than trying to man fight 3 heroes, which isn't the best decision. But, like, if you'd used your chains here, Viper might have been able to kill this Ogre. Like, at this point, if you're using your chains. And this comes down to understanding, like, spell cooldowns, because, like, they literally can do nothing to you for 5 seconds. Like, he doesn't have any mana. So he could have done stuff to you if he had mana, but, like, this is an opportunity where you can be playing aggressively and getting kills. And what you do is you end up retreating because you see more heroes, rather than understanding the weaknesses of their heroes. Viper, like, follows him around, and he ends up getting a kill here, but dies for it. Instead of, if you had just been fighting down here, you probably would have killed 2 of them. Viper gets away. Like, that's just kind of a, you decided to retreat when you were stronger because you didn't realize that you were stronger. Here you waste your you waste your chains on a raged lifestealer. That was a good combo. Really good TP by Tusk. Have a better Sunstrike from Invoker. Like, this fight is just riddled with inefficiencies, in that you're fighting when you're not supposed to fight, you're retreating when you're not supposed to retreat, you're using your spells inefficiently, you missed a Sleight of Fist chains combo, then you changed a guy who is raged. Like your decision making in fights just isn't quite there yet. And I think one of the best ways to practice that when you're working on, like, when to retreat, when to fight, is honestly, like, you can just play lots of overthrow, because lots of overthrow is just, it's basically fighting on steroids. Granted, it's not the same as playing Dota, because Dota, it's a little bit different in that you have more things to factor in and worry about. But those kind of constant fighting custom games are really good for understanding when you're weaker and when you're stronger. And what I'd recommend is just going in, seeing what you can do, seeing if you can outplay heroes, outplay people, maybe pick Ember Spirit, and do as much as you can. So that's, like, good understanding of Ogre. So here's a situation where you can kind of infer how alone he is based on how he moves. So, like, right now, Ogre walks up to you, and you have a dark map. Let's say you haven't been paying attention to the mini-map, so no one is showing on the map and hasn't been showing for 30 seconds. Which is a total lie. We've seen 2 heroes mid. But at this point, what you can do is you can actually infer where other people are on the map based on how Ogre plays. So, if he's walking up to stun you aggressively right here, but he decides to back. And so what this is this is a very defensive play by him. One second. But, like, this is a very defensive play from him, so he started to retreat. So at this point, you could be thinking, like, this guy's by himself. And if we were to look at their minimap, just based on his movements, right, he is by himself. And this is kind of like an inference, and this is where, like, you can get punished for thinking this kind of way about Dota. But you can definitely infer a lot of these things, and in this situation, it might have gotten you a kill. Because the instant he retreated there, I would be thinking, I'm stronger than him, I'm just going to try and kill him. You know, and instead what happens is you kind of let him retreat. This is definitely the safe play, but going for him there is definitely the aggressive play. And you have reason to think that he's by himself. Now, when he, like, walks back into range and stuns you, now I would be thinking he's not by himself. But we can see 3 heroes on the map, so we know he's by himself. And you've got a Pudge flanking. Like, I would be going right now, rather than sitting here farming. and a free kill walks away, essentially. Like, you're not even paying attention to this ogre. Like, you still end up getting the kill. But, like, you should have gone for him 30 seconds ago, 20 seconds ago. Like, what I see a lot in your game, honestly, and some of this just comes down to playing more, but you've got to be thinking ahead and thinking.
Dire's top tower is under attack.
You got to be thinking about what you're going to be doing next while you're doing the current task that you're doing. Now, if last hitting and like farming these creeps and that kind of thing is like too difficult for you to do without being able to focus on other things, that was good remnant out. And practice, right? Like, if you can't get every last hit while your brain's thinking about something else, then practice. Practice to the point, like, you need to practice last hitting and you need to practice your basic mechanics until they're at a point where you can do them without thinking about them. Because you want to devote your brain space to other things during a Dota game. This is good understanding of Fire Shield. But again, like right here, you have a second where you could be clicking elsewhere on the map, looking around. Like, what's going on here? Right? You can't see the Tuskar. Only I can see the Tuskar. But here you TP bottom, bottom's bottom, so maybe you're looking for a kill. There's 3 heroes bottom, you are 2. It's a bit scary. But here, like, your camera is focused on you. Whereas when you want your camera here, like, you want to be seeing, like, what items does he have? What items does he have? Right? If Invoker has Blink Euls, you're actually dead right here. But he doesn't have Blink Euls. He's going for Aghanims. But, like, this positioning wouldn't be okay if his item build was different. Just like if Ogre had Blink Euls, or if, you know, Lifestealer went Blink Abyssal, right? Like, you could just die here. And so, like, some of this is just updating yourself as to what items they have. And currently, like, you're not clicking on other heroes, so you don't actually know. So while you may feel safe here, you actually may not be. So here you finish your Battle Fury, which is good. Walk into a bunch of stuns and die. So this death, like, at this point, you get your Battle Fury, which is nice, and you get a nice Sleight of Fanes off. You even get a Searing Chains off on a couple heroes. It hits the Lifestealer, I think, as well as the Spear Breaker. No, it hits the Ogre. But, like, right here, your spells are all on cooldown, except for this. Except for your ultimate. And as an Ember Spirit, especially in this, like, glass cannony build, like, you have 1,000 health, and 10 armor is actually pretty decent, honestly. And that's part of the reason people go Aquila, is it's so much armor. But like, you're weak as a hero, and so what you're looking to do is you're not looking to engage with your physical hero. You're just looking to sit back to Sleight of Fist and Searing Chains heroes until they're at a point where they can no longer fight you, and so they're ultimately pretty much just going to be retreating, and that's when you can go in with your hero. Whereas, like, now, like, you charge in because you have all your spells on cooldown, and you're like, oh, I should be right-clicking him. And it just ends up getting you killed to a bunch of heroes who have their spells off cooldown. Whereas if you just Sleight of Chains there, like, Sleight of Fisted and Chains got Sleight of Chains. I mean, I guess that's kind of what it is. But if you had just used your spells and then waited for them to come off cooldown, and then gone back in and done another Sleight of Fist, then maybe you'd be ready to re-engage with this Viper. As it is, you just died for free. And that's really bad. Like, you're the most farmed hero in the game. Like, your deaths mean a lot in terms of how much gold you give up. Granted, like, you're giving up more gold because more other heroes are dying, but your death is probably worth 500, 700 GPM swing for their team, especially if all their heroes are there. But what ended up happening in that fight is like you died for free at the beginning of it, and then your team was left fighting 5v3. And they kind of filed in one after the other. But a lot of it is just your death was poor positioning by you. At this point, right, it's a tough game. And so when you're dead, sometimes it's good to reevaluate the game at that point. Because this game is definitely still winnable. But like you're struggling quite a bit. The Tusk is super scary. Like 16 kills, like he's rolling. And he's definitely a hero that you want to keep your eye on. He's pretty difficult to watch at this point because he has a Shadow Blade. So like you want to be playing around that as much as you can. Sometimes you don't have the ability to play around things when you're behind. Sometimes you just have to take risks. And some of those risks mean split pushing in situations where you might die to a Shadow Blade. But like your way back into, like, you got to be thinking about what's killing you. And what's killing you right now is like Spirit Breaker's charging you and ulting you, and then you're dying in that combo. Or Tusk is punching you, and that's kind of what's killing you. So you either need to itemize to survive that. You can build like Lincolns, BKB, whatever, those kinds of items. Or you can just say, I'm going to die to that, and I'm going to be super ultra damage glass cannon. And go that route. They're just two different options. You're probably just dead. Oh, Spirit Breaker doesn't have charge or his ult. That's good. So you end up getting away there, and you pretty much use your spells to your max efficiency. But like you definitely could have jumped out like at this point and been ultra safe. Or when you get snowballed there, I probably would have jumped before that snowball hit. Because if they properly chain your stuns, you're just dead. So you get away mostly out of bad play by them, not good play by you, when you had the time to react. You throw down a Remnant, retreat back to base. And what you're kind of facing right now is their team is too difficult for you to engage in. And a lot of that is because you've missed Ember Spirit's window of strength. Some of that's because you didn't farm fast enough, but most of it is because you just weren't looking to engage in fights when you were the stronger hero. And at this point, at 27 minutes, you know, you're 10 minutes too late to the party. Like I said, your playstyle would have been fine if you were a Midas Medusa. But you got to be thinking, like, what hero am I? When am I looking to make an impact? And how can I do that? Because in a lot of ways, like, you're playing from pretty far behind at this point, I would say. Like, your kills and maybe net worth, you're actually okay. But in terms of kills and in terms of map control, you're pretty far behind. And so these parts of the game are, how do I get back into the game? And mostly when you're playing behind, there's like two major ways to play. One is to group up with your team and to smoke gank. The other way is to split push. And you can usually do a combination of the two. But, you know, they're risky. This is just a free kill. Really dumb by Tusk. But, like, you right now, it's definitely safer for you to farm your own jungle like you kind of have been doing right now. But that's not necessarily going to win you the game. Right? Playing from behind, you've got to take risks, and I think the risks you've got to be taking, especially when Tusk is down, like, this is a mistake. You should be pushing this wave, and you should be pushing it, like, deep into their tower, with the goal of trying to force them to all react to you, and then you just jump out to your Remnant, and you're fine. There's nothing in particular that's, like, super scary for you. The only thing that's super scary for you is you get punched from a Shadow Blade Tusk into a Spirit Breaker stun combo, and you will die instantly to that. And there's almost no counterplay for you unless you have a gem, which you really can't afford to do, or a sentry, which you really can't afford to sentry the whole map. If anyone else attacks you, there's nothing to worry about in the sense that you should be able to react to it before it happens. Some of this is you're moving, like, Spirit Breaker does a good job here of charging you from a from a position that's not as expected. But like, you're also doing a bad job here of not thinking about what are they doing. Like, in this situation, you shouldn't be walking through the middle of the lane. You should be walking down the left side of the lane. And the reason for that is there's 3 directions essentially that Spiritbreaker can charge you from. Most likely is from his base, so from the bottom. The least likely is from the top, so from behind you where you have a creep wave, which is possible, but then the second most likely is from this right side. And if you're standing in a position that gives you the most time to react, then you're going to have the most time to react. And maybe like your reaction isn't good enough to Searing Chains this guy and jump to your Remnant from this point. And that's okay, like nobody has that kind of reaction speed. Every once in a while you'll be watching a pro game and Sumail will like escape a ridiculous gank like this. And it's not always because this guy can just click faster and react faster than anyone else, because your reaction speed is mostly limited by just physical limitations in how the human body is designed. But what you can do is you can prep your brain to be thinking about these things, right? If Spiritbreaker's charging me, what's my reaction? Right? It's Searing Chains ultimate, or just flat out ultimate, right? There are a couple of ways I can get away from ganks like this. And if you're prepping your mind, then your reactions will actually happen faster, because instead of, oh my god, Spiritbreaker is charging me, what do I do? That being your initial reaction, your reaction is, I know what to do, and you do it. And this all comes back to thinking about these situations before they happen, anticipating the game rather than reacting to it. And I think that's, you know, when you reach a point where you can start anticipating your opponents, then you're going to move up in MMR to a point where you can no longer anticipate them because they move faster than you're able to anticipate them. But right now, like, you're not anticipating their movements, you're just reacting, and it's not helping you win these games. Granted, they're throwing, you're throwing. Like, there's a lot of throwing back. Like this Tuskar dying in your jungle for no reason. But eventually, they're going to reach a point where Tusk can do that stuff and get away. And once that happens, you end up losing the game. It's very difficult for you to avoid a lot of these ganks. Like, it's very difficult for you to avoid a Spiritbreaker. But it is possible, and you as a player should strive to do it. I don't know what Pudge is doing hooking him. Here you're playing with items rather than TPing in to help your team. You're walking there instead of using your boots of travel. Maybe you don't want to fight, but like walking to your tier 3 to do nothing is pointless. Like, this is an absolutely pointless play. Like, if you're not going to join your team, don't join your team. That's fine. That's a perfect strategical choice. But go do something rather than sit behind your tier 3 and watch them win the game. Like, go push top, go push bottom. Like, if you TP bottom right now and threw a Remnant into your base and just push this tower, and maybe you get like 300 or 400 points of damage onto this tower, like, you're doing something for the game, whereas just sitting back here is doing nothing. So here you go Sleight of Fist Chains, which does good damage. So this is good. But like, you could have been doing this 10 seconds earlier if you had TP'd in, if you had used your mobility a little bit better. What's nice about Ember in some ways is that he's very hard to push into the high ground against because of the way Sleight of Fist works, as well as Battle Fury. Like, especially up in your base, the other team basically has to kill you before they're able to push. So like, that's part of his strength, is that he almost guarantees games to go to the late game if he's smart and doesn't die. And you've got to be thinking that kind of at this point as an Ember, is that if I die, the game ends. If Viper dies, like, maybe you and Coddle can hold, but if you and Coddle die, the game's probably over. Just like if Potom dies or if Pudge dies, like, it sucks. Your team fight's going to be a little weaker, but you probably still can hold. So you ping out Roche. Looks like they're going to the Roshan pit. Again, like, you're farming the safe place on the map, and I'd like to see you farming more aggressively. Farming the dangerous place on the map, trusting that you can react, trusting that you can outplay. And then doing little things to help yourself. Like, you just died to a ward in your jungle right now. You TP back, that's fine. Throw a Remnant, also fine. Viper lives. You miss your Sleight of Chain's Fist. Like, I think you're too scared for most of this fight. Jump back. Like, you're being too scared, I think. So I understand they're scary, but again, you gotta be thinking about what can kill you. And what can kill you right now is Tusk punching you, Spirit Breaker charge connecting, and that's pretty much it. Maybe you getting stunned by Ogre, right? But you can see Tusk. He's right here. So you're not at risk to get punched if you walk up. And if they start running at you, you can always jump back to your Remnant. Like, instead of kind of running around here doing nothing, you can walk up, stun. If he goes for his stun animation, you jump back. Or you Sleight of Fist. Or you use those spells, right? Play around what you know that they're capable of, rather than waiting for your team to initiate. So you get charged here. Your spells are on cooldown. You allow the charge to connect, which is okay in this situation. Not always is it okay to allow a spell to connect, but you have 4 of your heroes here, and Spirit Breaker's pretty out of position, so I think it's actually okay to let him connect his stun there. Granted, it's safer to just jump back to your Remnant before the stun connects, but I think this is fine, given the positioning of the situation. He ults, kills your bottom. Here's good. Tuskar punches you there, I think you die, but... Like, you're not dying and you're doing a lot of damage.
Radiant's top tower is under attack.
Missed your chains combo. Sleight of Fist is up. Bad chakra use.
Radiant's top tower is under attack.
But this is good. Like, you're kiting, you're using your spells, you're retreating kind of thing, and this is sort of one of the issues with Ember, is what he's weak to is big tanky units that when they're not surrounded by creeps and taking a lot of cleave damage, they die. They don't die. And kind of Lifestealer, for that reason, is actually a pretty good late game counter to Ember, in the sense that Lifestealer likes to build AC, which is one of the strongest items versus Ember, because it just gives AoE armor, as well as quite a bit of it, to its primary target, and he's a strength hero, which means he's going to have a lot of HP and be pretty tanky. He also likes to build Abyssal, which is probably the hardest counter item in the game to Ember, in that it's a form of lockdown that you can't BKB out of. You basically need a Linken's to avoid it, but oftentimes in a game there will be more spells to block with that Linken's. But here, like, again, farming the safe lane, farming the jungle, rather than pushing. But this is good. Like, you go to push the wave. Like, here I'd be using my Flame Guard. It's different. So, like, in the mid-game, you're not looking to use your Flame Guard to push the wave, because your Flame Guard is your main source of damage in fights. Right, so in that like 10 to 25 minute window, you want to be saving your mana for Flame Guard because it's your main source of damage. Whereas in this stage of the game, your main source of damage is your Sleight of Fist and your Chains combo. Right? So it's actually okay to be using your Flame Guard at this point, because it's probably not going to do that much damage in a team fight. Like, as the game changes, you use your spells differently because you need to use them in different ways. Like, this is almost useless in a team fight now. Like, maybe it stops the damage from Ogre's stun combo, or maybe saves you from a meteor. But that's about it. Like, this is not a damage spell anymore. This is a defensive spell. It still does the damage, it's just the damage is far less relevant now. Especially because you have the mana pool to spam with Battle Fury. So again, fighting mid, and you're pushing. Like, look, see if you want to join that. Because your team's doing fine, honestly. Like, you need to be there at this point for your team to win fights. This Lifestealer is super scary. It's just going to right-click everyone down. So you TP back, but you join too late. Like, by the time you've joined this fight, 3 of your teammates have already died. So, again, like, it's about making a decision in Dota, but you want to make the decision where you want to make that decision before it reaches a point where it's no longer salvageable. Whereas if you had been fighting when all of your teammates are alive, maybe you have a chance to win that fight. Maybe. I think it's unlikely at this point, but maybe. But when you choose to join at this point, there's absolutely no chance. Like, this is just 30 seconds too late. Like, you should have just stayed top and kept pushing. And, like, if you're not going to fight, don't fight. If you are going to fight, fight. Don't get indecisive and do the in-between. Because the in-between loses you games. Do the decisive. Do the push. Do the fight. That's all. Because, like, you're achieving nothing right now. I mean, this tower goes down, which is really nice. And maybe you stayed long enough just to kill that tower, but you could be beating on a tier 3. And, like, the best way to defend a push, there's 2 ways, is to defend it with spells and make it impossible for them to walk up your hill. And the other way is to do it by split pushing, by basically saying, I'm going to take your base before you can take ours. And a good team will do both at the same time. But you can't always afford to do both, and so sometimes you have to choose. And the strength of your hero is definitely defending the base rather than pushing. But you, in this case, probably could have pushed for 20 more seconds, 25 more seconds, and then come back and defended. Or maybe you had Caudal recall you, or those kinds of things.
Dire's middle tower has fallen.
You probably could kill them. Nice crit. Okay, this is a small thing about Tuskar. You can actually tell who he's snowballed based on how the snowball's spinning. So, if you look at the snowball, and it's tough to see when the screen is paused, if you watch who it's spinning at, because it's sort of like a golf ball, or anything that rolls, basketball, whatever you want to think of. Whatever it's rolling at in a line is who it's targeting. So you see how it's like spinning towards the bottom? So you can tell that the bottom is the one that's targeted. So oftentimes what you'll see is when Tusk snowballs, you'll see a pro like move perpendicularly and see if the snowball moves up or down. And if it moves down with you, then he's snowballing you. And then that person runs away from the snowball. Whereas here, you both end up getting hit when it could have just been just the bottom, and then you would have been able to react during this time that he's stunning the bottom rather than being stunned yourself. It doesn't end up mattering in that situation, but that's like a small thing. Again, you use your chains before he rages, and you can't man fight Lifestealer. So like poor understanding of his spells that counter you. But that's part of the reason that Lifestealer counters you in the late game. And so you don't want the game to reach that point. I mean, Viper counters Lifestealer. So it's like, this is what happens in Dota games, is that you counter one hero, then they pick a hero that counters you, and then your team picks a hero that counters them, and so then you end up having like a nice little balance of, you know, you have 3 or 4 counter picks on your team, and they have 3 or 4 counter picks on their team, and it's a way in the way in which the clash happens that causes the fight to occur. I haven't talked a lot about your item build. I think Daedalus is fine though. I think at this point your team's struggling for damage, and I don't think you can afford to build defensive. Although you're going Linkings now, which is okay. I don't know. At this point, like, even more damage would probably be better, considering if you get hit, you're dead. But the Lincolns does save you from the Shadow Blade Punch combo. So it does allow you to split push more aggressively. Actually, I think he can punch you through Lincolns anyway. Yeah, he can. Never mind that. Miss your chains. Get stunned. Get hit by a meteor. That's okay. I'm racking up kills now, which is good. But this is the first time in 38 minutes that your team has actually fought as 5 together. I guess the second time. You did fight at your tier 2 together. And that fight went okay. Bottle. Guess that's fine. So your team ends up making a really big comeback here, which is good. And a lot of it's mostly just because you're working together and fighting together. But now you're abusing the strength of Ember, which is throw a Remnant, TP back. Lifestealer comes in, he's wrecking your team. Some of that's Lifestealer is just really strong at this point, so you can solo kind of your supports on your team. Some of that is like you were pretty inefficient about the ways that you like TP'd back to the tower, like or TP'd back to your base and then TP'd back out. You could have been more efficient and maybe gotten back sooner. Like if you're spamming your bottle, if you're TPing back and then remnanting back at like 3/4 HP and allowing that fountain regen to take you up to full kind of thing. They're like minor things, but I don't know if there's much you could have done to save them. I think you played that fight mostly pretty well. In 1.5k games, like a lot of these games are very back and forth, as you can tell, because people make quite a lot of bad decisions throughout the game. And I think if you can learn to anticipate really well as not make so many bad decisions, right? Like minimize the number of times you die for no reason, you're going to win a lot of games. Simply because you're not contributing to the throwback kind of thing. So I think you just let that creep live. One thing you could have done instead of walking back to kill it. Oh, it did die. Never mind. This is one other thing about Ember. And this comes to his buffs. I'm not going to see it. So, when you look at his buffs, he has 2 Fire Remnant buffs. And what you'll see is that this is Fire Remnant charges. So this lets you know how many more Fire Remnants you can throw out. But when you see these things, these are actually how long your Fire Remnants are lasting. So like right now, you have a Fire Remnant up, so you don't actually have to throw a Fire Remnant, just based on your buffs. So this comes down to just understanding like how your hero works in a lot of ways. Because right here you waste a Fire Remnant when you could have just jumped back and had a Fire Remnant now. Because for 15 seconds, you're not going to have a Remnant to jump back to, mostly just because you wasted it. And this means for 15 seconds you're pretty weak if they go on you or catch you. It's not going to end up mattering because they don't go on you, but definitely could have been an issue. And maybe you could have afforded to play more aggressive there. Missed the combo, which is alright. You see how you basically just like tickle the Lifestealer? Ember's not a good single target DPS hero. He is a great spread damage hero though. Pot him by his back. Again, you're throwing a Remnant when you already have one down. Like, see, this one still has 15 seconds left on it. And this one is the one you just threw down. Right? See how it just expired, so you no longer can jump to the remnant that's here, because it's gone. Whereas this one still has 20 seconds left. But you guys are doing fine. Like, you're coming back, which is really good. You're getting a lot of kills, but a lot of it's just based on how well you can kite. Sleight of fist here, fine with that.
Radiant's middle tower is under attack. Radiant structures are fortified. Radiant's middle tower has fallen.
One thing you should work on is the sleight of fist chains combo. Is because you've missed it quite a few times this game. Again, you use chains before he rages. Forced to use our extra remnant. You're gonna get snowballed. See if he gets in range. Good shards.
Dire's top tower is under attack.
Nice chains. You chainsed as he was trying to punch you. It just prevented him from chaining you, or from punching you, so that was good. Give me the dagger comments, Guru.
Dire's top tower has fallen. Dire's bottom tower is under attack.
If you have any questions, Darbaugh, he just joined my stream. I record these on my stream. So if you want to interact with me as I'm going through your replay, like, just let me know. And then we'll set up a time and I can watch it while you're there too. So you can ask questions and whatnot. If you have questions, Darbaugh, let me know. Ember Spirit doing Ember Spirit things. Defending the base with Sleight of Fist.
Dire's top tower has fallen.
Good Yules by Coddle.
Top barracks has fallen.
What is he doing? He's just dying. So, like, you can see, like, in this game, like, if we were to sum it up, your team all dies, then their team all dies, then your team all dies, then your team all dies. Like, if you can somehow just learn how to not die on your whole team kind of thing. Granted, it's your team that's dying, it's not necessarily you. You only have 5 deaths at this point. But learning to stop feeding when you're ahead will win you a lot of games, too. I think you're doing okay, honestly. The gem is a nice pickup. I don't know if you bought it or if somebody else gave it to you. It's definitely good. But I think, like, you have a pretty good understanding of how to play Ember at this stage of the game. Because you're hanging back, you're using chains and sleight of fist pretty well. But you aren't necessarily,
Radiant's middle tower has fallen.
like, you don't have as good a grasp of how to play him in the mid game.
Under attack.
Here you commit for killing these towers. I don't know about that. They kill Ogre. So, like, I understand you're feeling the need, like, their team is stronger and they have 2 lanes of frags. But you gotta think about the strength of your hero. Like, the strength of your hero is not pushing towers. You really do very little damage to towers. You're mostly, like, hero damage. So, like, at this stage, instead of pushing these... Like, if you were a troll here, this is a good play. Because Troll can shred these towers. Or if you're a Lycan with a Necro 3, like, this is a good play. But you're not. You're an Ember. And instead of looking to end the game because he's bought back and can't buy back, and he hasn't bought back necessarily, but instead of looking to end the game this way, there are other ways to end the game. The ways to end the game are by pushing their racks in and picking off anyone who shows up. Because if you can constantly keep the game as a 5v, they have less than 5 heroes, you can win the game that way. And so I'd like to see you hitting the racks here. And if anyone comes up, you can Remnant on top of them, or Sleight of Fist chains combo into a hook, and they'll die that way. Like, play to the strength of your hero rather than making sort of rash decisions because you feel like you're behind and there's like no other way. Like Viper's got the idea, he's hitting the racks. But if you like Sleight of Fist chains combo that Invoker, granted there's other creeps, so there's like a chance you may not get it. He's probably dead. You probably could have just Remnant on him and killed him. Like, this is good. Because now when Lifestealer revives, it's a 5v4, 5v3 kind of situation. Wow, you got lucky, you killed him in the fountain. You're at half HP, but I would be looking to engage here rather than retreating. Maybe you're a little worried about the Lifestealer, and that's a reason to go back, but and your team kind of sounds for a back, so that's okay. Like, that was a coordinated effort, but right now you have 40 seconds where Invoker's down, and your team, like, while you may not be full HP, full whatever, like, you are at a numbers advantage. So I would be looking to press that by sort of letting your foot off the gas pedal by backing there as a team. You're giving them a chance to reestablish the 5v5 fighting. It's an okay decision, but I think I would have pressed it more aggressively there. Rapier, honestly, Rapier would have been fine. At this point, you could probably just sell your bottle, build something else. There's a point in the game where you got to be thinking, like, your item build, oftentimes you want to counter whatever they're doing with their item build. And, like, mostly as an Ember at this point, I want to be asking myself if I need to buy an MKB or not. And this is just a simple, like, check their items, see what they have. Because Rapier is probably fine, honestly. A second Daedalus is really good. It's probably the highest damage you could go is the second Daedalus, without like the risk of a divine Rapier. Rapier is obviously the most damage, but if they have evasion, you definitely want MKB at this point. You also could look to go like a blink for better positioning, but I think your positioning's okay and you're not struggling with that, so I think it's fine not to go blink. Carrying the gem is okay too. Like, you're saving for buyback, which is good. What other items would be good? Scotty makes you a little bit more tanky. It does allow you to also kite the Lifestealer with Sleight of Fist, because you can apply the slow to him, regardless of the rage. So maybe that's a consideration as well. That's more of a kiting item. Like, more of a utility kind of item, whereas, like, Daedalus is raw damage. And raw damage is fine at this point. Big fight. Good Moonlight Shadow. They have vision. But you can see, like, it's kind of a damage issue at this point. Good chains. Abyssal, and you're probably dead now. Nah, he didn't get the bash. But you can see, like, you don't do much damage to them if there's no creep wave. And, like, they're taking your base while you're just kind of, like, chipping away at them. Eventually you'll win these, like, long, drawn-out team fights as long as you stay alive. Missed chains there. But sometimes it's hard for your team to stay alive. I saw a funny stat on like lower MMR games, but the team with more strength heroes tends to win low MMR games. It's like 60% of the time. Just because they get so tanky and people can't coordinate their damage very well to kill things. But like, I think at that point, like, you definitely could have won that game. There are a lot of opportunities where you could have won that game. But I think overall, if you're looking to get better as a player, the biggest thing I want you to work on is anticipation, which is thinking about how the next 5 minutes of the game is going to go and how I'm planning to play and how I'm going to win the game, kind of thing. The other thing I want you to work on is like everyone can sort of work on like laning mechanics, but like laning theory is something I also want you to work on, in the sense of what times do I push, what times do I zone, what time, like how, like I want you to work on free farming a lane while denying the offlaner experience. And there are a lot of ways to do that. A big one is maintaining creep equilibrium, so learning how to keep your wave like fairly close to your tower without pushing. Another way is learning to dive aggressively to prevent other heroes from getting experience under a tower. Another way is like just reading about when you should pull as a support, how you should pull as a support, when you should deny waves, like learning when siege creeps spawn, like what are the times that they spawn, what are the ideal creep waves to be pushing. Like all of this is stuff that you should learn and you should look up and you read about. Almost like you can find these on the internet, you can read about it on Dota 2 wiki, like those kinds of things. Watching streams is another good way to do it, but like you need to expand your Dota knowledge so that when you're in game you can use that knowledge to your advantage, rather than just kind of like doing things sort of haphazardly. You're doing things at the times that most benefit you. Other things to work on, like I think your Ember play is honestly okay, but I think you definitely needed to move in that 10 to 20 minute mark. Like understand when your hero is, like every hero has a power curve. In that, like, if you think of someone like a Medusa, Medusa is extremely weak early, is okay in the mid game, and extremely strong late. And so as a Medusa, you play to the late game, right? You play to your strength. And Ember is really weak in the laning phase. He's not really weak. He's okay in the laning phase. And he's really strong in the mid game, and then okay in the late game. And what I saw you playing was more of a Medusa power curve, which is I'm going to farm the mid game and play to the late game, as opposed to playing in the mid game and then sort of going to the late game if it happens, kind of thing. Like play on your hero's power curve rather than playing for the late game. If you're going to play this sort of style of Dota, that's fine. Pick a hero that fits that more of a style of Dota. Pick the hardest carry in the game. Pick a PA. Pick a Dusa, those kinds of things. Overall, I hope this was helpful for you. If you have any questions for me, let me know. Those are the 3 big things I want you to work on. There are obviously a lot of other little tips throughout the game. If you're looking to get a replay reviewed by me, let me know. You can either send me a message on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. You can send me a message in my Reddit thread, which I'll post below this, or you can shoot me a message on YouTube. All 3 work. And like I said, if you want to be there and give feedback, like ask questions of me as we're reviewing the replay, totally down for that too. You'll just need to contact me and then we'll set up a time to do it. That's it from me. Hope this was helpful. Thanks.